Or good evening to all of you. Thanks for being here. And what I'm going to do is transfer a little bit here, but I at least want to give you some, or change from what we've been talking about. I at least want to give you a little bit of background about what I do. I am a government services attorney at Barnes & Thornburg, which the shorthand version of that would mean lobbyist, public affairs, or things that affect the government procurement. I additionally am in the entrepreneurial services practice group at Barnes & Thornburg, where we assist growing companies in an interdisciplinary fashion, where they come to us with as any growth company would, a set of problems, whether it be intellectual property, government-related, environmental, business, etc., and we advise them. So to that extent, I will be speaking as to the unregulated entities. For those of you in the room who think, man, how does this really affect me? What should I be thinking about in terms of my business? That's what I'm here to do. Well, Tony Sullivan from Barnes & Thornburg can deal more with the environmental regulation side of things. So, slide please. Generally, Waxman-Markey, and I refer to this in different ways. You'll see actually in the top of the screen, House Resolution 2454. I apologize if I interchange these as I'm speaking. But generally, Waxman-Markey regulates utilities, oil refineries, energy producers. And I've listed them up here, and also some property owners. Next slide, please. What I'm going to address some more is the homeowners, car owners, small business owners who do not meet these thresholds where you have to worry about your CO2 emissions. The question I get from our clients all the time is when we speak in this government space, is they say to me, and very condescendingly, what does this affect me? Why does this affect me? Why should I even care about Waxman-Markey? Energy prices in Indiana are low. I don't think politically this thing's going to play out. As we mentioned earlier, the vote in the House was 219 to 212. It's a very slim margin. Why should I even care about this? Next slide. I just want to go through a quick review. If these caps were to be imposed, as it brings, energy, as it brings the CO2 emissions down, this is going to cost the energy producers, and they're going to pass those costs on to you and to your business. I mean, that's a fact that's going to happen. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that it's about $175 per household, or a $22 billion effect by 2020. Next slide, please. Costs are going to rise. Now, I'm not here to speak about degree. Anthony Paul is the perfect person to talk about the degree and the statistics to which energy costs will or will not rise. But you must realize energy costs will rise to some level if this bill passes. And additionally, overall production costs will rise. If it costs you more to pay for energy, and your supplier in the supply chain, just as Mike Radko spoke about, it will cost more. Next slide, please. So the question, or what I'm here to speak about, is what small businesses should be doing. How should you prepare? Next slide. The first thing, though, I always say to our clients is there's no, and I'm being a little cute here, there's no silver bullet, there's no green bullet, there's not one thing I can say to you to do, or anyone at the panel can really say to you to do, that can spur you forward to be green or to solve the increase in energy. But the answer, and next slide please, that we have is a simple answer, and it's to internally, and this is at the specifics, you need to have a plan. And even if you believe Waxman-Markey is not going to pass, just as Anthony Paul pointed out, energy costs over the next 10 years are going to rise regardless of whether Waxman-Markey passes. He showed it on the statistics. The utility companies will say that in Indiana. I mean, they're strained in their infrastructure to begin with. They need additional costs to support their infrastructure. Energy costs are going up. Even though Indiana is a great environment for energy, and it's cheap, and there's lots of coal burning that makes it cheap, energy costs are still going up. Next slide, please. So, whoops, could you go back one? So in the comprehensive plan, you need to have a business component and a government relations component, i.e. that's what I do. That's why I introduce, this is the parts we advise our clients to think about. Next slide, please. So I've divided this into both short-term and long-term thinking in terms of your business plan, short-term and long-term thinking in terms of your government relations plan. In the short-term, think income statement. How can you attack your income statement to root out or get rid of excess energy costs that can reduce your cost of doing business? And in the balance sheet, in the long-term sense, you can think of your balance sheet. What type of investments can I make to reduce energy? The big picture, though, is this is still a competitive thought process. So while Mike Radcliffe said earlier, and I completely agree with this, you can't be completely profit-oriented. At the same day, if you think about profit, and you think about how you can reduce your costs versus your competitor. If your competitor is not reduced at the same rate as you, you can maintain, a constant price point for your services and your goods better than your competitor. So it's a good reason why you should think about being green, even outside of Waxman-Markey, but especially if Waxman-Markey hits, you're really going to want to think about your income statement and your balance sheet. And what I'm going to do now is try and give you some examples. I only have 10 minutes. I can only give so many examples, but as we move through this, to give at least some that'll get you thinking about this. Next slide, please. So in the short term on your income statement, if you just think simply, how can you start bringing down quickly costs? And you can think about anything from energy efficient products, light bulbs, motion detectors in your office, green utensils. How much styrofoam do you buy? How much things do you buy that you throw away that can be reusable? Is it better to buy plates for your office if you don't serve food and run the dishwasher every 2 times a week or whatever? Use less paper, weatherization. For people in their houses, it always amazes me, business owners who, in their homes, they'll have the best insulation ever because they're trying to conserve their own personal energy costs. Then in their commercial buildings will have the worst insulation that you've ever seen. They pour out tons of air conditioning, tons of heat into the world, and then wonder why their energy costs are high. These are things to think about. Fleet management as well. So in the long term, on the next slide please, you can also think about infrastructure investment planning. What can you do to invest in maybe longer term energy efficiency things, and additionally energy producing items? I'm going to give you the easiest example. It's a little too simplistic, but solar panels. And I'm going to run with solar panels as I move through my next set of slides. But in an overall sense too, you should know if you buy something with a lot of upfront costs, will it save you energy in the long run? I would never advocate, hey, go out and buy a solar panel if in the long run you're not saving money. That's just not a good business concept, and it affects the bottom line negatively. But you should have internally, whether it's a net present value calculation for those MBAs in the room and people who think up here, or a return on investment, or even simply a payback period. If I buy this, will I have recovered my money and energy costs over 3 years? In the long term, on your balance sheet, you should think about what is on that balance sheet that can save you energy in the long run. Next slide, please. So now in the government relations component, and this is where these tie together. This is kind of my expertise. I'm going to turn this over to Chris in a second. It's from the state. We can talk further about incentives. But so for the short-term incentives, next slide, please. There's a whole host of short-term incentives that you can look to right now. I put up a website, the Desire website, which is, and I always get this wrong, but it's the database of state incentives for renewables and energy. It is a whole host of economic incentives that you can get right now that are online from the government, either from the state or federal government. They're economic incentives packages. The reason I point these out, and referring back to my solar panel example, is this. Solar panels are expensive. But if you can get a tax credit that helps offset a ton of the initial investment in the panel, or a ton of initial investment in whatever energy saving or energy producing measure you're trying to employ, then your payback period for your net present value goes up and it becomes a worthwhile project, thus benefiting your balance sheet and thus making you more energy efficient, green, and profitable. So this is a whole host. Kristen's going to talk about a lot of these in a second.